Hello, it's Michael Gunther with Collaboration. I'm excited to talk about succession planning for family-owned businesses. About two-thirds of our clients are family-run businesses, and as you can imagine, they have a little different dynamic than maybe a non-family-run business in terms of succession planning. Often there's family members that may or may not want to carry on the business, and there's a lot of other challenges tied in with a family-run business versus a non-family-run business. As a collaboration, just as a quick reminder, we are about inspiring, educating, and empowering business leaders to achieve breakthrough performance. And we do that both through consulting, executive coaching, and building collaborative leaders within organizations. The family-run business has a very unique component. And if you're a family-run business, you know that. Because you may be working with your spouse, you may be working with your siblings, your kids, your grandkids, a grandparent, uncles, aunts. And when there's a successful family business, everybody wants a piece of it or be involved with it, and especially as it passes on to generation. But those things can also cause a lot of challenges if things aren't clearly defined, outlined, and the organization isn't prepared to really move to the next generation. In fact, there's an interesting study by Harvard printed, and it is also represented in Forbes, was only 30% of family-run businesses make it to second generation. 30, a third of the businesses, and only 12 to third generation, and even less to the fourth generation, 3%. And even though family-run businesses make up over 50% for gross domestic product, and a third of the Fortune 500 companies are family-run, to actually transition from generation to generation decreases. And there's some structural things, there's some legal things and accounting things that need to be prepared for to really have a succession plan for your business. And you think about when a family business first started, there is this what I call family balance. It was this driver, the parent, whoever it was who started the business, they had this vision. They wanted to create something larger than themselves. They wanted to create a legacy for their family. They wanted to ensure that their family for generations had a place where that they could continue to build and thrive, and take that owner's vision and that founder's vision and carry it on as a legacy for the family. That core component, as you move from generation to generation, may begin to disintegrate, as you can imagine. Because you may get second generation or third generation who don't have the same passion. They may be looking at the business just as a paycheck, or they may be looking at the business of, yeah, I didn't start this thing, it was my parents or my grandfather's business, and I wanted to take it in a totally different direction. So you could see there's already could potentially be a conflict or a lack of initiative potentially, or even a lack of understanding what the vision and legacy was. And so I call it family balance because part of what needs to happen initially is really what are those legacy elements, those vision, those core values, the mission of that organization. Why did the founders start this? What was their drive? How do we capture that both in writing and video today, whatever it may be, so we can carry it on to the next generation and ensure that that core driver of the founders gets carried on. I'm going to come back to family balance because there's a lot of other elements of that as well, but I want to talk about the three other key areas that we're going to discuss. One is owners. Obviously, owners are the folks who have shares in the organization. They may not be all family members, so it might be 2 or 3 individuals that have the business passed down to them, and they now own the business. They may have other family members who don't have ownership working within the business, and so ownership and getting clarity on what is the owner's compensation, what's the owner's role, how do they interact with the organization. It is assumed sometimes that they may be the executives of the organization. In fact, family-run businesses that have the family members running the business in the second and third generations often have some of the worst performing organizations. And why would that be? Part of it is that most organizations and family businesses do not develop the leaders within. They're just learning from the previous generation. But if the previous generation was building a business and say it was $5 or $10 million, and now you're working at a $50 million organization, it takes different processes, takes different leadership, takes different strategy, skill sets. And so if family members are just jumping in and all they're learning is how it's always been done, it often creates poor performing organizations. So we're going to talk also about some of the executive areas and what you could do to really help set your foundation strong moving forward. The other area is governing board. Governing board often could be, some people call them family council, some create an outside board of directors. There may be family members on there, and we always recommend some non-family members on there to give a different perspective, but it's very, very clear on what their roles and responsibilities are. And remember, if you're a corporation or an LLC, it's almost having a governing board that also has a responsibility to the entity and less of a responsibility to individuals. And they want to ensure that the entity is doing the things they need to do to move forward. Because as you can imagine, in family-run businesses, there could be a lot of dynamics and challenges going on between personalities that you may or may not have in another business, or in another business, you might choose to ask someone to depart, or in a family business, it may not be as easy to terminate someone from the family as well as your role in the organization. So there's a lot of issues going on with family succession planning. One thing, the points of failures that we call is, again, the executives. We often see there are not clear roles and responsibilities. There's not clear skill sets you're looking for. They're not comparing those roles and responsibilities to other people in their industry. And so if you don't have clear roles and responsibilities for the executives, you also don't have clear decision-making parameters. So is it certain siblings always making the decisions, or is the parent who's retired but still making all the decisions in the business? So without clear expectations, roles and responsibilities, and how I'm going to be measured, we often see a lot of confusion in how decisions get made. We had an organization where about 100 employees, and the employees didn't know who was responsible for what. Who do they go to for what decisions? Because sometimes it was this owner, sometimes it was the sibling, sometimes it was the parent, and they would get conflicting messages at times. So the executive team, without a solid executive team with clear roles and responsibilities, especially their family members, we often see a point of failure. The other thing with executive teams, if the family is choosing not to bring somebody in, that means they're saying, we do not want non-family members to be part of the executive team. If that's the case, part of what needs to happen, I recommend, or we recommend, I should say, a collaboration, is that you put in some requirements. Maybe you have to have a college degree or even an advanced degree, depending on the size of your organization. Maybe they have to have worked in another competitor or in another industry for at least 5 years outside your organization. So it's just not assumed because you're a family member, you're going to be an executive. You actually have to earn it. And that's a hard thing for a lot of folks to understand, especially when, if they were given, say, a quarter of the company, maybe a parent had 4 kids, everybody has 25% now because the parents have passed it on. And they assume because I have 20%, 25%, I should be an executive within the organization, and can cause a lot of conflicts. So clear roles and responsibilities, and really clear org chart to say, where do we anticipate people growing up into roles? So we have another organization we're working with, and they're moving to the 3rd and 4th generations, but they're already identifying people who are interested in possibly growing up to be an executive within the organization and creating growth plans. And some of them are 5 or 10 years out, but they have to go and work in different areas of the organization. They have to go get certain experience, certain training. They want folks to get advanced degrees. So they're really setting the next generation up from a skill set, as well as an understanding that is just not a given, you have to earn it. So that's a point of failure we'll often see. The other one is ownership. And we see this with all businesses, especially when there's partners. So when you start a business and you're an owner, you often, if you're just one person or maybe 2 people, You often have all the decisions go through you. You also have a lot of benefits. You can take different tax benefits. You can choose to pull money out different ways. You can choose on who to have part of your inner circle, so to speak. But as you move to the next generation, you may have people who have ownership who decide they don't want to participate within the organization. They just may want to keep their ownership and not be a active participant. And so we see a major point of failure here if it's not clearly defined. How does an owner get compensated versus how does someone as an executive in the organization get compensated? So we had this one client, there was 3 siblings. They were all being paid exactly the same. One was a CEO, one was a COO, and the other one chose not to be in the business. So, but the one that chose not to be in the business felt they should be paid exactly the same as the other 2 individuals. And the organization had been paying all 3 of them exactly the same. Well, as you can imagine, there's going to be some resentment around that. There's going to be some struggles around that. So with ownership, it's really getting clear, what are my ownership compensation? Do I get distributions quarterly? Do I get any other benefits? My healthcare paid for? Do I get any type of monthly stipend? Since if I'm on the board, if I am an executive and ownership, then because I know you would have had your clearly defined executive roles that we just talked about, you could say for this executive, he's the CEO, so he's going to earn $200,000 a year. As a COO, you're going to earn $175,000, and here's your compensation package based on your role, not on your ownership. And so this ownership area, often a lot of conflicts. What ends up happening, because some people feel it's unfair, often families in the second generation will often sell the business rather than deal with the conflict of dealing with the ownership issue. The other area is family discord. When you think about families, there are a different set of principles that how families operate versus how businesses operate. Now, businesses are about risk and conflict and challenge and pushing and trying to grow, and you have to deal with tough decisions all the time, and you have to take risks to grow your business, and that may mean taking on debt and other things. In a family, you're looking for security and harmony and for everyone to get along. So they're almost conflicting values. These values are conflicting based on what is actually required to work succinctly within an organization. In addition, when you start getting to the second and third generation, you now get spouses and not only family members, but spouses and nieces and nephews and grandkids all having an opinion, all wanting jobs, all wanting to get into the organization. And so another point of failure is not having a clearly defined family constitution, some people call it family council, some call it rules of engagement as a family. But it's about getting really clear as a family, these are the things that we always want to maintain as a family. We want to keep these values true. In addition, if family members want to get involved or have an opinion, this is how that looks. So if you're a non-participating family member, every year we have an annual meeting. You can come get an update, give your thoughts, ideas, be part of vision strategy. If you now want your kids to work in the business, because you're working in the business, well, here's how they can come in. They have to go through HR. They have to be, they can't work directly for you. All those things that are going to cause issues with not only family members, but other employees. There is a set of guidelines. Some organizations I've seen up to 50, others usually 10 to 15 guidelines of how the family needs to operate. As you can imagine, the family discord is a major point of failure. So if you're in a second or third generation business, and it hasn't been clearly defined what the roles are and how we're going to be compensated, it's not clearly defined how people are going to be ownership and how that's going to be compensated. It's usually around money first and then role. And then the family discord, as you can imagine, there's a lot of emotion. And in business, we're not supposed to have emotion initially, right? You go logic first and emotion second. In family, emotion drives a lot. And so if the organization isn't set up properly, there tends to be a lot of family discord, and you get it. I mean, I grew up with 10 brothers and 6 sisters, so some I get along with, some I have to work harder at. We all have baggage from different relationships that will pop up unexpectedly, and so in a family business, you have siblings working together, and maybe the older siblings have always not trusted the younger siblings, and the younger siblings never have felt trusted by the older siblings, or maybe the spouse of one sibling is trying to get involved to make decisions, but they don't understand everything else going on because it's not really active in the business. So part of the point of failure is family discord and understanding how do you create an environment so people can share their thoughts, they can share their concerns, they can understand how people are compensated, they can understand how ownership is transitioned, how people can earn more money, grow in the organization. It's interesting. It's almost like there's things like if you work for a big company, they always have guidelines on how decisions are made, how much money, if you're in a senior role versus a junior role, how big of a decision-making capability do you have financially? You might even have how people need to get hired and go through HR through multiple interviews. You might have pay scales based on role. Family businesses often don't work that way. And that's why they fail to go to the second and third generations. You're also this family discord. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this because as you can imagine, part of the reason I got my master's in psychology is trying to understand all the dynamics going on when dealing with family businesses and how to address those issues of interpersonal issues. What are family issues? What are interpersonal issues? And what are actually business concerns? And getting the family to have a set of rules of engagement to play within. The other point of failure is wealth transition. So when a business is starting off, they probably don't think much about this. But if you're going to second, third, or fourth generation, can become a very large organization. And the next generation can't buy out the next generation. So I know a client that's going through this right now. They're moving to the third generation. Some of the second generation people are getting ready to retire, but no one can afford to pay what the business is worth because the business used to be a $10 million business and now it's going to be a $100 million business. And so that wealth transition is a really important area to focus on and getting that clearly defined. And my recommendation too, not only getting it defined, but part of your succession plan should be reviewed annually because things change. Maybe you did an acquisition, now you're going from 100 million to 150 million. So the wealth transition strategies that work on 100 million may not work at 150, or tax laws change, or people's individual desires change. Maybe someone decides they want to leave earlier than they thought. And so the wealth transition question is probably one of the bigger holes. We have a lot of great relationships with some great law firms and financial planning firms that have multiple options. I love the ones that aren't they're more agnostic in their approach because there's some folks that say, oh, ESOP's the only way to go, or this program's the only way to go, or I like folks that really listen to what the family want to create a legacy. Are they set up to really transition to future folks? Then let's set that up. The wealth transition piece also, as you can imagine, can create a lot of stress, especially if you're doing a transition where some people aren't ready to transition their ownership and others are. And again, money being the driver, and often I see in the wealth transition, outside influences with the owners as well. So often we might have a conversation with the owners only first, then bring in spouses, significant others, or other family members, but the owners have agreed to something and they'll listen to everyone else's opinion. And as a group, we're having this conversation. And so that we're not getting back conversations later on, coming back and then an owner saying, hey, I decided to change my mind after talking to my spouse or significant other. So this wealth transition is just critical. And I was talking earlier about also family businesses being notoriously poorly run. And part of it is from the executive team, they're not getting trained. There's issues with ownership clarity. There's family dynamics going on. And the wealth transition then is a piece of that. But the wealth transition is why so many family businesses don't make it to future generations because they end up selling. They think the easiest way to get rid of this is to sell. I don't want to work with my siblings anymore, or my aunts and uncles anymore, or I don't, if someone gets a divorce and they want to split their business, they don't want to work together anymore. So the wealth transition often, if these other areas aren't clearly outlined and defined, is where you'll see a lot of change go on. But one last thing I want to talk about too with the executives is that the executives, again, family-run business typically poorly run because they just haven't been taught, don't know, they haven't had maybe big corporate experience that can bring in. That often, if you bring in a non-family member executive, whether it's a COO, Chief Operating Officer, or CEO, those key roles, bringing someone in who has that experience, those companies tend to outperform family-run businesses who have family members running some of those key roles, if those family members have not had that experience. So it's hard for a lot of family members to realize, like, hey, maybe I'm not the best fit for this. But it happens all the time. Bill Gates said, hey, I'm not the best fit for this, and he had someone else run it for him. And so it's important for the family. I'm going to go back to this family balance slide, because at the end of the day, what does the family want? What type of legacy do they want? What's the core values of the organization? What's the vision of where they want to go? What are those things as to why whoever started it in your family, what were the reasons? What was their drive and passion? And if that is still true for your organization, then how do you set it up to be successful, whether it's with family members or non-family members? And it's about structure. It's about getting some clear strategies in place and getting the right skills and behaviors in place as you move ahead. So I see I have a few minutes for some questions. Let's see, I have Rick saying, I'm planning on retiring in the next 5 years. Good for you, Rick. When should I start succession planning and who should be involved? Well, first of all, I don't know how many owners, is it just you? Are you passing it on to your kids? If it's just you, I would recommend to everybody, actually, I just recommend every year you should look at your exit strategy. And I don't care if your exit strategy is 20 years away, because life changes, situations change, but every year you should be planning. 5 years is probably a good time, because 5 years you can make a lot of structural changes, get the team in place you need, and get it figured out. I recommend, even myself, I'm having a meeting this next month with my lawyer, my financial planner, and my CPA to look at my exit strategy long term and how that's going to play out. And yeah, to me, it's an annual event you should be doing. And there's a lot of factors based on our life as well as the business. Who should be involved? If you have family members that are owners, they should be actively involved. I think getting a set of advisors, whether it's consultants like us or it's along with a good CPA, good financial planner, good lawyer, so you can get it from all angles. Because the tax accountant's going to tell you you need to do this, and the financial planner's going to say this, and the CPA is going to say this, and we're going to say this. But if we're all together, we get to see how all those different ideas from each one of our specialties can connect to make a really solid plan. So my thought is, make it happen. You should be doing it annually. You should always be looking out. Again, I've seen people all of a sudden, something's happened in their life. There was a death in the family, and they decided they want to go live in Barcelona for 5 years, and they're done with the business. Or all of a sudden, the parents decided they were done, and they want to pass on the kids, and the kids or the organization weren't prepared, but the parents were ready. And so I think the sooner the better, and then update it annually. If that answered your question, Rick. I think I have time for one more question. How do I make time to start succession planning while also performing my day-to-day responsibilities? Well, that's a good question. Whoops, I went 2 slides ahead. It's a good question. I think you should be part of your strategic planning. And, you know, I'm a big believer in every week you should have working on your business time and building your strategy plan. And hopefully you have a 5-year strategic plan for your organization, because succession planning should just be part of that. And every year, as you're updating your 5-year plan, you're also updating your succession plan. So you should be spending time every week on your strategy. If you haven't started your strategic plan, you might just make it a goal over the next 6 months to spend an hour or two on it every week to start getting all the components. Because all those areas I talked about, there's probably 10 to 15 components of at least of each one of those sectors that need to be dealt with to really help a solid plan come together. And then lastly, I do have time for just quick, how long does it take to create a succession plan? There is no light switch solution. And depending how the dynamics of the family and depending how strong the interpersonal relationships are with the family, if there's a lot of discord already or people are kind of getting along, it could range, could be a 60-day process, it could be a year plus process, depending on some of those family discord dynamics I talked about earlier. I do want to thank you for your time today. Hope I enlightened you a little bit on succession planning. Is a big topic. It's something you're not doing yet for your family business, you should be thinking about. As we all know, time goes by really quick. Here's my contact information. We'd love to sit down and at least maybe if you just want a free consultation to see what's going on and we can point in the right direction. We will have a white paper on our website for you as well. And a bottom line, start succession planning now before you need it. Succession planning provides peace of mind that the company will thrive for generations to come and create that legacy that most people who have a family business have a drive to create a legacy so it continues beyond themselves. So no time like the present. Do it before you need it. We all know that because when you need it, it's usually done hastily and some poor choices and money's left on the table and a lot of hurt feelings often. So have a great day. Hope your family business is thriving and is going to continue to thrive and that you can make it to the second, third, and fourth generations. And let us know how we can be a part of that to help you really have breakthrough performance, not only for you, but for the next generations to come. Thank you very much and have a great day.